A bright blue-white light split the night sky over Nevada's empty highway. Jake Morrison, a 32-year-old mechanic who was driving home from a late shift, slammed on the brakes when something huge screamed overhead. The object was smooth, sharp, and pulsing with dying energy. It cut a trench through the desert before coming to a stop in a cloud of sand and sparks. Jake sat still, his knuckles white on the steering wheel and his heart pounding against his ribs. The only sound for a moment was the ticking of his truck's engine. Then a hatch on the ship that had crashed hissed open, letting out a cloud of purple steam into the cool desert air. "What in the world?" Jake whispered, his need to know more stronger than his fear. 4 people came out of the wreckage and each one was more than 7 feet tall. Even in the dark, their armor shone. It was made of a crystal-like material that changed colors. They moved like predators with precise and coordinated movements. These weren't just regular soldiers, they were clearly elite fighters. Jake took his flashlight and got out of his truck. He felt unsteady on his legs, but years of fixing broken things had taught him that problems didn't go away on their own. He walked up slowly, raising one hand in what he hoped was a sign of peace that everyone would understand. Commander ZUX Thor, the tallest alien, turned to face him, but Jake didn't know that yet. The alien's face was sharp, and there were glowing markings on its cheekbones and eyes that were a bright amber color. When ZUX Thor spoke, a device on his chest turned his words into clear English. "Stop, primitive life form. The Korvaxian military is now in charge of this area." Jake stopped about 20 feet away and put his hand down. "Looks like you guys had a rough landing. I'm a car mechanic. I might be able to help?" The 4 aliens looked at each other and then something strange happened. They laughed. It wasn't happy laughter. It was the kind of laugh that only happens when something is silly or silly. Lieutenant Kale Rin, the squad's weapons expert, stepped up. His armor had burn marks from many fights. "A mechanic?" he said again, his voice dripping with disdain. "Quantum resonance drives power our ship, and dimensional flux capacitors keep it going. It works on ideas that your kind won't learn about for another 1,000 years. And you think you can help?" Jake said, "I don't know what any of that means," and scratched the back of his head. "But I know when something is broken and I know how to fix it. I've been doing it my whole life." The team's tech expert, Specialist Ven 9, took out a device that projected holographic data into the air. She looked at Jake from head to toe and her face got more and more funny. "Commander, the physical structure of this organism is very weak. The density of the bones is about 40% lower than ours. Muscle mass is not very useful. A Korvaxian's life expectancy is only a small part of a Korvaxian's. This creature is weak by our standards." The word hung in the air of the desert like an insult. Jake felt his face get hot, but he kept his voice steady. "Yeah, well, I might not be able to arm wrestle you guys, but your ship isn't going anywhere without help. And if I'm not wrong, the nearest town is about 50 miles away. You don't have many choices." Sergeant Torvan, the squad's expert in combat, crossed his huge arms. "We have plans for emergencies. Rescue teams will find us within the rotations of planets. We don't need help from this." "Rotations of planets?" Jake frowned. "You mean days? You might not last long in this desert in the summer. It can get up to 120 degrees out here and there isn't much water." ZUX Thor said, "We are trained to survive in places much worse than this little dust bowl. Get back on your primitive mode of transportation and keep going. We don't need help from lower beings." Jake looked at the 4 aliens and then at their ship. He could still see smoke coming from some panels, and he could even hear the whine of systems that weren't working right from where he was standing. He heard a grinding noise coming from deep inside the ship, a sound he was used to from years of working with machines. If they didn't fix that soon, the broken thing would cause a lot of damage to other systems. "Suit yourselves," Jake said as he turned back to his truck. But he didn't go in. Instead, he leaned against the hood, took out a bottle of water and drank it all. He wasn't going anywhere. Not when people, even aliens, were in trouble. He could hear the aliens talking to each other in their own language behind him, with their translator devices turned off. The sounds were sharp and clicking like music. Ven 9 walked up to the ship after a few minutes and started working on an outside panel. Jake saw her use some kind of diagnostic tool out of the corner of his eye. The holographic display that came up showed that the ship's systems were failing badly. Jake couldn't read the alien symbols, but he knew that red meant bad anywhere in the universe. It took an hour. The aliens were getting more and more angry. Ven 9 hit the hull with her fist and yelled something that didn't need to be translated. Kaelrin walked back and forth, his weapon powered down but still strapped to his back. Torvan sat on a rock, and his earlier confidence had turned into worry. Commander Zux Thor stood apart from the others and looked out at the horizon, where the first signs of dawn were starting to show. Jake could see that the alien was under a lot of stress because he was in charge of his team and was ashamed of failing. Jake drank some more water and then made a choice. He pushed away from his truck and walked back to the ship. He yelled, "What I said before was true. I can help. I don't know what your quantum thing is, but machines are just machines. They break in ways that are easy to guess. And fixing things? That's what I do." Zux Thor turned to look at him, and his amber eyes were judging and figuring things out. The commander didn't say anything for a long time. Kael'Rin finally broke the silence with a loud laugh. "Let the soft skin try, Commander. What bad things can it do? When he fails, and he will fail, maybe it will make us laugh while we wait for help." Ven 9 said, "It could also speed up our destruction if he breaks more important systems." Zux Thor said in a low voice, "Our critical systems are already too damaged for us to fix them here." He looked at Jake with something that might have been desperation, but his pride kept him from showing it fully. "Very good, human. You can look at our ship. But know this, there will be consequences if you do more damage." Jake nodded. "Okay, that's fine. By the way, my name is Jake Morrison." Kael'Rin said, "We don't give our names to lower life forms." "Then I guess you can keep calling me human," Jake answered calmly, not letting himself be provoked. He walked up to the ship and quickly looked over the damage on the outside. There were a few places on the hull that were burned, and one of the landing struts bent when it hit the ground. But the noises coming from inside worried him the most. There was a grinding noise and a high-pitched whine that made him think there was too much pressure building somewhere it shouldn't be. Jake said, "I need to get inside." Ven 9 looked at Zux Thor, who nodded. She pressed a series of buttons on her wrist device, and a panel slid open to show the inside of the ship. The walls seemed to pulse with light, the consoles floated without any visible support, and the central column glowed with barely contained energy. Jake had never seen anything like it before. Jake knew that this was an engine room even though it was full of strange technology. And engine rooms, whether they were for a 1972 Ford pickup or an interstellar spacecraft, all worked the same way. Power went in, power was distributed, work was done, and exhaust went out. He asked, "Where is your main power source?" Ven 9 pointed to the column that was glowing. "The core of quantum resonance. It gets energy from folds in space and sends it out through the—" "Okay, right," Jake said softly. "Where is that grinding noise coming from?" The aliens looked at each other again. They hadn't said anything about a grinding noise. Jake followed the sound to a part of the wall that looked different from the rest, more mechanical and less elegant. He put his ear against it and felt the vibration. Something is getting stuck in there. Something that is real, not just energy. "Can I?" Jake took out his multi-tool, a worn-out Leatherman he'd had for 15 years, when no one said anything. The aliens barely hid their laughter as he picked out a screwdriver attachment. Torvan shook his head and said, "He comes at our advanced technology with simple metal tools. This is so stupid." But Jake had already found what he was looking for. A seam in the wall panel that was strange in design but still worked as a way to get in. He carefully worked the panel free, moving slowly and on purpose. There were a lot of crystal tubes inside and it looked like liquid light was flowing through them. And there, blocking one of the channels, was a piece of debris, a piece of the hull that had been pushed in during the crash. "That's what's wrong," Jake said, pointing. "That blockage is making your coolant, or whatever this glowing stuff is, back up. You can hear the pressure building up. Something's going to blow if it keeps getting worse." The aliens all gathered around to see. Ven 9's eyes got bigger. "Our scanners didn't pick this up. The debris must have been made of our own hull material because it showed up as part of the ship's structure." "So I was right?" Jake asked. "This is like a cooling system?" "Yes, but it's more complicated than that," Ven 9 said with a sigh. "Can you get rid of the blockage?" Zux Thor asked, and his voice was less angry now. Jake thought about the problem. The debris was stuck in there really tight and the channels around it looked weak. "Maybe. But first I need to let some of that pressure out, or when I pull this out, the glowing liquid will go everywhere." "Is it risky?" "Very," Kael'Rin said. "Plasma coolant at that temperature would turn human flesh into gas right away." "That's good to know," Jake said under his breath. He thought for a moment before looking at the other systems around him. "Is there a way to change the flow for a short time? Make a detour so I can safely work on this part?" Ven 9 brought up her holographic display again and moved her fingers over the data. "In theory, yes. But it would mean changing 3 different systems at the same time, and the timing would have to be exact to within a few hundredths of a second. I can't do this by myself. What if I help?" Jake wanted to know. You tell me what to do and when to do it and I'll help you out. For the first time since the crash, Ven9's face showed a hint of respect. Would you trust me to lead you? You could die if you make one mistake. Jake didn't care. Well, I'm here to help. Let's get going. The sun was coming up over the desert, painting the sky in orange and pink. Jake stood in front of 3 different control panels inside the alien ship. Each one had symbols he couldn't read, but colors and patterns he was learning to understand. Ven9 had been going over the steps for the last half hour. At first, she was condescending, but as she saw that Jake was really paying attention, asking smart questions and understanding how their systems worked, she became more patient. Ven9 said, "When I give the signal, you will press the blue symbol on the left panel, count to 3, and then press the green symbol on the right panel. Press both orange symbols on the center panel at the same time after 2 more seconds. The timing has to be perfect. Blue left, count to 3, green right, 2 seconds, both orange center," Jake said again. Understood. Kaelrin stood with his arms crossed nearby. This is crazy. We should just wait for... Lieutenant, we've already talked about this, ZYX Thor said. Our communication relay was broken in the crash. We can't ask for help. If we don't try to fix this, we'll just sit here and slowly bake in this desert while our ship's power core becomes unstable. I know which choice I like best. Torvan had actually helped Jake by keeping a panel open while he worked, even though he had been doubtful at first. The big sergeant was getting more and more interested in how Jake was going about his work. He had said, "You're not afraid of dangerous work for a fragile being." Jake had said, "Being careful isn't the same as being afraid." Jake wiped the sweat off his forehead as they got ready for the tricky rerouting process. The ship's internal temperature was going up, which was another sign that the cooling system was broken. "Are you ready?" Ven9 asked, holding her hands over her own controls. "Yes," Jake said. 3, 2, 1 now. Jake pushed the blue button. It lit up when he touched it and it was warm and responsive. He counted to 3 Mississippi and then pressed the green button. There was a hum on the ship like someone was holding their breath. Just a second. 2 seconds. 2 orange signs. Jake pushed them with his index fingers and the ship seemed to sigh. The noise of grinding got quieter and then stopped completely. The whine of rising pressure stopped. "Pressure is equalizing," Ven9 said as she looked at her readouts. "The bypass is still working." "I can't believe that worked." "Why wouldn't it work?" Jake asked as he walked back to the open area where the debris was stuck. "You made sure the ship had backups, right? Multiple ways for important systems?" "Yes, but..." Ven9 stopped herself. "You got that from what I said?" Jake said, "It's just good engineering. My truck has the same philosophy. There are many ways to keep things running if one system fails." Kaelrin made a sound that showed he didn't care. He compares our quantum resonance ship to his old-fashioned ground vehicle. It's always surprising how arrogant lower species can be. But ZYX Thor was looking at Jake in a new way. The person was now carefully loosening the debris, moving slowly and carefully. He would stop every few seconds to look at the systems around him and think about how his actions would affect them. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't trying to show off. He was just doing his job. "That's it," Jake said, finally getting the piece of hull out. It was about the size of his fist and had sharp edges. "Okay. Ven9, can you get the flow back to normal now?" She moved her controls around, and the liquid light started to flow correctly through the channels. The ship's temperature started to drop right away. A few systems that had been off came back on. "Plasma coolant circulation restored," Ven9 said, and her voice made it clear how relieved she was. "Hull temperature going down. Better distribution of power inside. I'm reading. Yes, the backup systems are working again." Jake carefully put the trash aside and closed the access panel. "What's next?" "What's next?" Torvan said it again. "That was just one problem, right?" Jake waved his hand around the engine room. "I can hear at least 3 other sounds that shouldn't be there. And when I got there, I saw that one of your floating consoles was crooked. Usually means that whatever is holding it up is broken." The 4 aliens looked at him. "You can hear problems in our systems?" Ven9 asked in a slow voice. "Can't you?" Jake really seemed confused. "It's not hard to see once you know what to look for." He went to the crooked console and crouched down under it. He couldn't see any support, but he could feel a slight change in the air, like heat waves but cooler. He slowly moved his hand through the area, feeling the resistance change. "Your anti-gravity field or whatever this is isn't even. It probably got hurt in the crash. One side is working harder than the other." He took out his flashlight and shone it at an angle. The beam showed something that the alien's eyes hadn't seen. a hairline crack in the floor under the console. There. Look at that crack. I bet there's an emitter or projector or something down there, and that crack is messing up its output. Ven9 knelt down next to him and took out her scanner. After a while, her mandibles clicked, which could have been a sign of surprise. He's right. The gravitic stabilizer under this deck plate is broken. The crack is too small for our sensors to pick up, and the stabilizer is still working, but it's not as strong as it used to be. Is it fixable? ZYX Thor asked. Ven9 said, not here, not with what we have right now. We would have to make a new part, but our mobile fabricator was broken in the crash. Jake thought about it for a moment. Does the field have to be perfect, or can it just be good enough to keep the console steady? It has to be perfect for flight operations. Functional would be enough for now. Then we can probably make it stronger. If you have something I can use to support the weak side even for a short time, it will take the pressure off the broken emitter and keep things stable until you can fix it properly. Help it? With what? Kaelrin asked with doubt. Jake looked around the ship and then at his own truck, which he could see through the open hatch. There's some stuff in my truck. A hydraulic jack, some wooden blocks and metal struts. We can probably make something work. Jury rig. Torvan said the strange word again. Jake said, it means making a temporary fix out of whatever you have. It won't be pretty and it won't last, but it'll work. Kaelrin laughed, but this time it wasn't as much of a joke as it was real disbelief. You want to help our advanced gravitic systems with wood and old metal? Do you have a better idea? Jake asked in a calm voice. The lieutenant didn't say anything in response. Jake had gotten his supplies and was carefully putting a hydraulic jack under the console 20 minutes later. It seemed silly that rough human technology could support alien anti-gravity, but as he slowly raised the jack, the console leveled out. The stress on the broken emitter went down and the field became stable. Torvan said in his own language, I'll be damned, but the translator heard it. It really is working. Jake put the jack in place and added wooden shims to make it even more stable. There. That should work until you can get a new part. Ven9 was running her scans and looking at the readouts over and over again. The output of the stabilizer has returned to normal. Power use has gone down by 15%. This short-term fix is actually effective. Sometimes less is more, Jake said as he wiped his hands on his jeans. Now, let's talk about those other sounds I brought up. Jake worked on the ship's problems one by one over the next few hours. The aliens' attitudes changed with each repair. Ven9 stopped calling him primitive when he found a misaligned power coupling by touch instead of scanners. Torvan nodded in agreement when he suggested using the ship's own damaged hull plates as raw material to patch other holes. He then helped him get the materials. Kaelrin even had to admit that it was smart of him to use heat-resistant tape from his truck's emergency kit to make a temporary seal for a broken energy conduit. When Jake saw that one of the ship's stabilizers was responding slower than the others, he figured out that it was a software timing problem and not a hardware problem. ZYX Thor actually smiled, which was strange for an alien with an angular face, but it was definitely a smile. The commander said, "You were right about one thing, human. Machines do break in ways that are easy to guess. And you know how machines work." "Jake," he said softly. "Jake is my name." ZYX Thor tilted his head slightly to show respect. "Jake Morrison. I am the commander of the Korvaxian Imperial Fleet, ZYX Thor." "Thank you." That was the first time any of them had really introduced themselves. The ship was buzzing with restored power by late afternoon. Not all of the systems were working. The quantum drive still needed special repairs. However, life support was stable, communications were partially restored, and the immediate danger had passed. Jake sat on the hatch of the ship and drank water while eating a protein bar from his truck. The 4 aliens were close by, but for the first time they weren't looming over him. They were just standing there with him. Ven9 sat down next to Jake on the ramp and said, "I have a question. Our technology is better than yours in every way. Our base of knowledge is much more advanced. But you did what we couldn't." "How?" Jake thought about the question while he chewed. "Maybe a different point of view? You were seeing your ship as what it's supposed to be, a perfect, cutting-edge machine. I was just looking at it and saw that it was broken and needed to be fixed. I wasn't worried about getting every little thing right. I focused on finding the problems and fixing them with what I had." "Pragmatism," ZYX Thor said with a thoughtful look. "We are taught to trust our technology, our rules, and the ways we have always done things. We have a hard time adjusting when those don't work. Humans have always had to adapt," Torvan said, his voice no longer mocking. "To make up for being physically weak with cleverness. To stay alive with not enough resources by being creative. Ven 9 said quietly, we might have underestimated how important that was. Kaelrin had been quiet for a while, standing away from the others. At last he went up to Jake. The lieutenant said stiffly, I was wrong. About you. About your kind. He looked for the right word and said, inappropriate. Jake said, we all make judgments. What matters is what you do after that. You helped me move those hull plates. That was more important than the words. Kaelrin's stiff stance relaxed a little. He sat down next to Jake on the other side. In our culture, being strong is very important. It is the basis for our whole military system. To be weak means to be less. Jake said, that must be hard for anyone who doesn't fit that mold. It is, Kaelrin said. I have a younger brother or sister who was born with a problem with their development. Their muscles never got as dense as they should have. They are always looked down upon even though they are very smart. Maybe, he said, maybe we've been measuring worth wrong. The evening in the desert was settling in, and the air was getting cooler. Jake could see the lights of a town starting to twinkle on the horizon in the distance. Your rescue team should be able to find you now, right? Jake asked. With some communications backup? Yes, ZX Thor said. I've sent our location. They will be there in 2 hours. Jake stood up and stretched. I guess I should get going now, he said. Have to work in the morning. Wait, Ven 9 said quickly. Can I scan you before you go? One more time. Jake shrugged his shoulders. Of course. She took out her device and ran it over him again. The holographic display showed the same information as before. Weak bones, not much muscle, and a short lifespan. But this time she put a note in the file in her own words. The translation was only visible to her. Physical metrics don't determine value. This person is better at solving problems and adapting than many Korvaxian officers. Suggest a new look at how species are classified. Thank you, Jake Morrison, she said out loud, for letting us see what we couldn't see. The 4 aliens stood together and watched Jake walk back to his truck. Before getting into the cab, he waved to them. That, Torvan said in a low voice, is the most dangerous weak creature I've ever seen. ZX Thor said, not weak. Just strong in ways we didn't see. The rumble of Jake's truck starting up was familiar. When he got back on the highway, he looked in his rearview mirror at the alien ship, which was now lit up and stable. He smiled to himself. He thought, just another day of fixing things that are broken. The aliens were learning a lesson that they would remember for the rest of their lives. That strength comes in many forms and that wisdom means seeing value in everything. Commander ZX Thor stood in the ship's control center, which was now partially working because Jake had fixed it. The main view screen came to life and showed the path the Korvaxian rescue ship was taking. They would get there in about an hour and a half. He should have felt better. He felt something strange instead, shame. Commander, Ven 9 said as she walked up to him, her data pad glowing with information. I've put together a full report on the repairs. I thought you should see this before sending it to Fleet Command. ZX Thor took the device and looked through the information. Every entry talked about a certain problem and how to fix it. He was struck by how many of the solutions had a small note that said, human methodology, unconventional but effective. He said, you're being thorough. Ven 9 said, I'm being accurate. Jake Morrison made important contributions. It would be dishonest to leave them out. And including them will raise questions. ZX Thor gave the datapad back. Questions about why 4 elite soldiers needed help from a species that was thought to be pre-interstellar and less advanced. With all due respect, Commander, maybe we should question those classifications. Kaelrin came into the control center before ZYX Thor could answer. His armor had just been cleaned of desert dust. Commander, the perimeter is safe. There is no more damage to report. The humans' temporary fixes are holding up better than we thought. Better than the repairs we made at first, Torvan said, joining them. I've been looking at the patterns of our failures. We were so sure that every problem needed a technological fix that we never thought about using mechanical methods. We could have removed the debris blocking the coolant line by hand, but we never thought to do so. We just kept running advanced diagnostics that told us everything was in good shape. Because it was by our standards, Ven 9 said. The debris was part of the ship. Our scanners are set up to find strange patterns in energy signatures, molecular structures, and quantum states. They weren't made to find something as simple as a piece of metal that was in the wrong place. That's a big mistake, ZX Thor said, sounding more thoughtful than angry. One we should talk about. Kaelrin went to the window and looked out at the desert where Jake's truck had been gone for hours. I've been thinking about what he said. About putting more emphasis on what is instead of what should be. We learn to adjust to the conditions on the battlefield during combat. But we've become reliant on our technology. When it breaks, we wait for it to be fixed or replaced instead of looking for other options. Torvan agreed, it's made us weak. Strong when things are just right, but weak when things change. People, on the other hand, Ven9 said as she opened Jake's species file on her datapad, have had to adapt under constant pressure. Their home world is harsh and changes a lot. In the beginning, there wasn't much of anything and there was a lot of competition. Because they didn't have any physical advantages, they had to be smart to stay alive. She made the display bigger so that it could show data comparing humans to other species in the galactic community. Look at this. When it comes to almost every physical measure, humans are at the bottom. Weakness, slowness, poor senses, short lifespan, and poor resistance to the environment. But they do very well when it comes to solving problems, recognizing patterns, and thinking flexibly. They evolved to make up for it, HFY Thor said. To find answers with few resources. That's right. And now that they're starting to go beyond their own world, they're using that same flexibility to deal with new problems. Ven9 shut the file. Jake Morrison didn't need to understand our quantum physics. He knew how things worked. Input and output. Problem and answer. A proximity alert went off. The rescue ship arrived early. Commander, the ship's communication system came to life. This is Captain Vorten of the Crimson Lance recovery ship. We are at the coordinates you gave us. Getting ready to dock. What's the status? HFY Thor turned on the comm. Commander HFY Thor, this is Captain Vorten. Our ship is damaged but still afloat. The crew is fine. We have some power and life support. Got it? We're looking at your ship right now. Commander, our readings show that there are a number of repairs that aren't standard. Explain? HFY Thor looked at his team. Ven9 nodded in support. Kaelrin stood up straight. Torvan just waited, ready to back up whatever his commander chose. Captain, a local person helped us out. A mechanic who is human. Is that a person? Vorten's voice got sharper with disbelief. Commander, humans are a protected species before contact. You know that interacting without permission. We crashed on their world, Captain. The person came up to us. We were allowed to get help in emergencies under First Contact Protocol 7. There was a break. Very well. We'll talk about this during the debrief. Now extending the docking umbilical. The link was cut off. A few moments later, a sleek ship that was smaller but more advanced than the one that had crashed moved up next to them. There was a flexible tunnel that connected its airlock to theirs. Captain Vorten was the first to go through. He was a decorated officer with silver markings on his uniform that showed he had served for 20 years. She looked around the control room with a practiced eye, taking in the jury-rigged repairs, the human hydraulic jack holding up the console, and the simple tape sealing a conduit. Please explain these changes, she said slowly. HFY Thor started by saying, the human found problems that our scanners missed. He came up with solutions on the fly using materials that were available to him and us. Vorten walked up to the hydraulic jack and looked at it with a mix of interest and doubt. And this rough piece of equipment is holding up a gravitic stabilizer? Yes, effectively, Ven9 said. The emitter was broken. The jack moves the weight around, which makes it easier on the broken part. It works, Torvan said. That's what's important. It was impossible to read Vorten's face. She walked around the ship, looking closely at each repair. Her engineering team came next, taking pictures and notes of everything. Finally, she went back to the control room. Commander, this is a situation that has never happened before. Your ship should have been completely disabled. Without the right tools and trained workers, these repairs shouldn't have been possible. HFY Thor said, but here we are. Here you stand, Vorten said again. She pulled up a holographic display that showed the crash site from space. Do you get what this means? A species that lived before we did not only saw our technology but also fixed it. That could be a security breach. There are rules. Protocols that recognize emergencies need to be flexible, HFY Thor said. The person, Jake Morrison, didn't ask us any questions about where we came from or how our technology works. He just saw people who needed help and offered it. He respected our choice when we first said no. We only accepted his help when it was clear that we couldn't fix the problem on our own. And he didn't want anything in return? It was clear that Vorten was skeptical. Nothing. He gave us his food and water. He spent hours fixing things in dangerous situations. He just left when the work was done. Vorten was quiet for a long time. I have to tell Fleet Command about this. There will be an investigation. I knew that would happen, Thor said. I am fully responsible for the choice to accept help from people. As do I, Kael'ren said as he stepped forward. I didn't agree at first, but the commander's decision was right. And I, Ven9 said. And I, Torvan said at the end. Vorten looked at the four of them. They were an elite team, decorated and experienced, and they were all standing together. Very well. We'll keep talking about this on the way to the fleet. For now, get together your most important tools. We're moving this ship to a place where it can be properly repaired. Vorten pulled Thor aside as the team started to pack up their things. Off the record, Commander, what was he like? This person? Thor thought about the question. Not showy. Be patient. Good at it. He made difficult problems look easy. He didn't get angry or proud when we made fun of how he looked and how he did things. He just kept working. You are talking about someone who has a lot of control over their emotions. Maybe. Or maybe he just didn't think our opinions were getting in the way of the work that needed to be done. Thor looked her in the eye. We judged him based on metrics that turned out to be useless. It didn't matter that he was weak. It didn't matter that he wasn't very good with technology. What mattered was that he could solve problems and he was better at that than we were. That's a big admission. It's a true one. And this situation needs honesty. He stopped. Captain, I know people will have questions about safety. But I also hope that people will question what we think we know. How we judge other species. About what we might be missing because we only see what we think we should see. Vorten's face relaxed a little. Between you and me, Commander, those are questions that a lot of us have been asking for a long time. Your experience might make those talks more important. I hope so. Because if people can do this, he said, pointing to the repairs around them, think about what they could do with the right tools and information. Think about what they could teach us. A partnership? Vorten raised her eyebrows. With a species that came before? Maybe one day. But first, we need to change the way we think about them. About all the kinds of animals we think are lesser. Today I learned that inferior is often just another word for different. And being different can be exactly what you need. The evacuation went off without a hitch. In less than an hour, all of the people and important equipment were moved to the rescue ship. The damaged ship was locked up and put under automated security measures until a team could safely move it. Thor took one last look at the desert through the view screen before they left. The sun was setting again and the sky was full of bright reds and golds. Jake Morrison was probably home by now, and he might have been telling his family about the strange night he had. Or maybe not. Thor thought he was someone who kept things to himself. The navigator said, "Course laid in, Captain. Ready to leave at your command." "Take us up," Vorten said. The rescue ship smoothly rose up, leaving the crash site behind. Kael'ren stood next to Thor at the view screen as they climbed through Earth's atmosphere. "Do you think we'll see him again?" the lieutenant asked in a low voice. "Jake Morrison? Not for a long time," Thor said. "People aren't ready for open contact. It would throw their society off balance and maybe even their whole world. But someday? Someday, Thor said. When they reach out to the stars on their own terms and in their own time. I think the galaxy will be surprised by what they find when that day comes. Like we were." Kael'ren said, "I hope I'm there to see it." "Me too, Lieutenant." "I do too." The ship broke through the last layer of the atmosphere and into space. The blue-green marble of Earth hung behind them, looking beautiful and fragile. But Thor knew better this time. It wasn't weak. It was strong. It had made beings who could thrive even with limitations and solve problems with nothing but creativity and willpower. "Are you weak?" "No." There were many things about people, but being weak wasn't one of them. The galaxy just didn't know how to recognize its strength yet. Thor thought that would make things very interesting when humans finally joined the galactic community. Very interesting, yes. 3 days after the desert incident, Jake Morrison was in the office of his boss, Tom Bradley, who owned Bradley's Auto Repair in the small Nevada town of Copper Springs. Tom was a big man in his 60s who always had grease under his nails and was known for being fair but not taking any nonsense. "Well," Tom said as he leaned back in his creaky desk chair, "are you going to tell me why you were 4 hours late to work on Monday morning, or do I have to guess?" Jake knew this talk was going to happen. He had come in late, tired, and covered in dust from the desert. His excuse that his truck broke down on the highway was weak at best. "Truck trouble," Jake said again, not quite looking Tom in the eye. "Ah. So that's why you had sand in your hair and looked like you hadn't slept in 24 hours? It was hard to fix the truck." Tom looked at him for a long time. "Jake, you've worked for me for 8 years. You're the best mechanic I have Hell, the best mechanic in 3 counties. You don't lie to me and I don't pry into your business. But you've been distracted all week. Staring off into space. Yesterday you diagnosed Mrs. Chen's transmission problem in 30 seconds flat, but it took you 10 minutes to remember to write up the invoice. Sorry boss. I have a lot on my mind right now. Things you can't say? Jake thought about it. What could he say? That he had worked all night fixing a spaceship from another world? That he had met people from another world? That everything he thought he knew about where people fit into the universe had changed? Yes, he finally said. Things I can't talk about. Tom nodded slowly. Okay, but if these things start to get in the way of your work, we'll have to talk again. Got it? Understood. Okay, now go. We have 6 cars waiting. Jake stood up, feeling better. Tom spoke again as he got to the door. Jake? I hope it was worth it, whatever it was. For the first time in days, Jake turned around and smiled a little. Yes, Tom, it really was. At the same time, Commander ZUX Thor stood at attention in Fleet Admiral Kronina's office on the Korvaxian flagship Eternal Dominion, which was 40,000 miles above Earth. Even for Korvaxians, the Admiral was a scary sight. He was almost 8 feet tall, had battle scars all over his armor, and a look that could strip paint. Let me see if I understand correctly, Commander, Kronine said in a voice that was dangerously calm. Your ship crashed on a world that was protected. You met a native there and let him on your ship. You also let him use and change our technology. Yes, sir, that is correct. Do you know how many rules you broke? 17, sir. I've looked over all of them. The ridges around Kronina's eyes went up. At least you did your homework. What about your defense? Protocol 7, Section 12. In emergencies where crew safety is at risk and standard solutions aren't available, commanding officers may ask for help from local people, no matter how developed they are, as long as the help doesn't involve sharing classified information or technology. The person didn't get into classified systems? No, sir. He only worked on mechanical and environmental systems. The quantum drive, weapons arrays, and communication encryption were still locked. And he didn't ask any questions about what they did? No, sir. He came to our ship to fix it, nothing more. Kronine got up and walked to the window of his office to look out at the Earth below. 15 years ago, I was on the survey team that first cataloged this world. It's a beautiful planet with a lot of different species. Back then, they were just starting to use chemical rockets. Now they have basic space stations and are planning missions to their neighboring worlds. ZUX Thor said, they're moving quickly. Some people would say too quickly. There are voices in the council who want to slow their growth. They want to make small changes and set back their plans. They say that humans are too violent and unpredictable to be allowed to grow technology without limits. Sir, with all due respect, that would be a mistake. Kronine turned around looking genuinely interested. Oh? And why is that? Because their adaptability, their ability to solve problems with limited resources, that's not a bug in their evolution, sir. It's a feature. Take that away, artificially limit them, and you don't get a safer species. You get a resentful one. And resentful species make dangerous enemies. You got all that from spending one night with a mechanic? I learned it by watching that mechanic solve problems in ways we never thought of. By seeing how he dealt with our advanced technology without fear or hesitation. By seeing how he used our own expectations of superiority against us. ZUX Thor brought up a holographic screen. Sir, look at this. It's Venina's analysis of how humans have changed over the last 100 years. They've gone from simple flight to space travel, from doing math by hand to quantum computing, and from living on separate continents to a civilization that is connected all over the world. The speed is unprecedented. That's exactly what the Council is worried about. But look at the pattern, sir. Every big step forward came from solving a problem they didn't have the right tools for. They split the atom not because they had the technology but because they needed it. They reached their moon not because it was easy, but because it seemed impossible. They have grown and developed by taking on challenges that seemed beyond their abilities. You're saying we should not bother them. I'm saying we should be very, very careful about getting involved. If we artificially limit them, we're not protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species. We're making one. Kronine went back to his desk, sat down hard and opened his own files. The Council will meet in 2 weeks. They will want a full report on your incident. What are you going to tell them? The truth, sir. That we crashed. That we were helpless, that a human helped us survive, and that in doing so, he showed skills that our classification system didn't see. That's not going to be popular. A lot of people on the Council have made careers out of the idea that we Korvaxians are better than most species. To admit that a primitive human outperformed 4 elite soldiers. With all due respect, sir, being popular is less important than being right. The truth is that Jake Morrison saved our lives with nothing but creativity, knowledge, and determination. That's not weakness, it's strength we didn't understand. For a long time, Crone 9 was quiet. Then he smiled, which was a rare thing for him. Commander, you've changed. 3 days ago, you would have given the facts and waited for orders. Now you're pushing for a strategic position. 3 days ago, sir, I thought I understood the universe. Now I'm not so sure. But I've learned that not knowing can be useful because it makes you question, look into things, and understand them better. Did your human friend teach you something else? More of an observation of his method. He came to our ship unsure of himself because he didn't know our technology. But instead of letting that stop him, he used it as a starting point. He asked questions, tested his ideas, and changed his approach. It was humbling to watch. Crone 9 leaned back. Commander, here's what you need to do. Write the most detailed report of your career. Include every interaction, every observation, and every conclusion. Don't hold anything back. Yes, sir. Then you're going to give it to the council in person. You're going to be asked some very tough questions. Some of the council members will want your command and may even call you reckless or a traitor for praising a lesser species. I get it, sir. Do you? Because this isn't just about your job, ZYX Thor. It's about how the Korvaxian Empire treats younger species. It's about whether we help them or hurt them. It's about what kind of galactic community we want to build. Your testimony could change that balance. Then I'll make sure my testimony is worth the risk, sir. Crone 9 nodded slowly. Dismissed, Commander. And ZYX Thor? For what it's worth, I hope you're right about them. Because in a few hundred years, humans will be out here among the stars, and I'd rather have them as friends than enemies. Jake's week on Earth went on with a strange feeling of being out of place. He did the things he usually did, like fixing cars, getting dinner at the local diner, and watching baseball on TV, but part of his mind was always elsewhere. His younger sister Emma came to his apartment on Friday night with pizza and beer. Emma was a college student studying aerospace engineering. She was full of energy and questions that never seemed to stop. She put the pizza box on his coffee table and said, "You've been acting weird all week. Mom called me and said you've been avoiding her calls." Jake said, "I've been busy." "You're never too busy for Mom. What's going on? Do you have girl problems?" "No." "Problems at work?" "No." "Are you having an existential crisis about what life means and where you fit in the universe?" Jake stopped moving, the beer bottle halfway to his lips. Emma's eyes got bigger. "Oh my God, I was just kidding, but I really did hit it." "What happened, Jake?" He put down the beer and tried to think of words that didn't sound crazy. What would you do if you learned something that changed how you saw everything but you couldn't tell anyone?" She sat down next to him and her playful look turned serious. "That's not very clear, bro." "I know. But what if?" Emma thought about it. "I guess I'd try to figure out what I could do with that knowledge. Even if I couldn't share the specifics, maybe the understanding would help me make better decisions. Help people in new ways." She paused. "Is that what this is about? You learned something new. Something like that. Is that why you came home on Monday covered in dust and looking like you had seen a ghost?" Jake smiled even though he didn't want to. "You pay too much attention. That's what you get for having a brother who thinks he's mysterious but isn't very good at hiding things." She took a piece of pizza. "I don't know what you're going through and I respect that you can't talk about it. But don't let it eat you up inside, okay? You're still you, the guy who fixes things and the brother who taught me how to change oil when I was 12. That won't change. What if your view of yourself changes? Then you get bigger. That's not bad, Jake. That's just life." They ate in peace for a while. Emma finally said something again. "Can I ask you something? Is this secret knowledge or whatever dangerous?" "No, it's kind of hopeful." "Then keep that. The world needs more hope." Lieutenant Kaelrin stood next to a hospital bed on the Korvaxian homeworld, which is in the middle of the galaxy. His younger brother Rixen was in it. His genetic condition had left him with weak muscles. Rixen was weak by Korvaxian standards, which was a source of shame in a culture that valued physical strength. "You're back early," Rixen said in a soft voice. "I thought your job would take longer." "We ran into problems," Kaelrin said. "But I wanted to see you to tell you something. If this is another speech about how to get over your limits." "No. This is an apology." Rixen's eyes got bigger. "What?" Kaelrin was sitting in the chair next to the bed. "I've been ashamed of you not because of who you are but because of what other people think. I let their judgment become mine. I let our culture's obsession with strength blind me to what you can really do. Kael'ren, what made this happen? I met someone. Someone who, by our standards, is even weaker than you. They have weak bones, little strength, and a short lifespan. By every standard we use to measure worth, this person should have been useless to us. But they weren't. They saved our lives, solved problems we couldn't, and did things we never thought to try. And they did it all while we made fun of them for being weak. Kael'ren looked his brother in the eye. I was wrong, Rix. About what's important and what makes a person valuable. Rixen was quiet for a long time. Who was this person? A person. A mechanic named Jake Morrison. Tell me everything about him. Every little thing. And Kael'ren did. He talked for an hour about the crash, the repairs, and how his feelings changed from anger to respect over time. Rixen listened and asked questions from time to time, and their faces grew more thoughtful. Rixen smiled when Kael'ren was done. It was a real smile of happiness. I want to meet them someday. This person showed my proud warrior brother that strength comes in many forms. Someday, Kael'ren said. When humans join the galactic community, I'm going to make sure they're treated with the respect they deserve. Not as lesser beings to be managed or controlled, but as equals with their own unique points of view. That's going to make you not very popular with the old-fashioned people. I don't care. I've cared too much about what people think who use the wrong standards to judge worth. It's time to change that, starting with how I see you. Rixen reached out and Kael'ren took their hand. Thanks, Rixen said softly. Thanks for seeing me. Thanks for seeing them. Thanks for growing. Thanks for waiting for me to catch up. In the days that followed, the effects of that one night in the Nevada desert kept spreading. Ven 9 started looking over the Korvaxian species classification system and finding mistakes and biases. Torvan began to create new training programs that put a lot of focus on both strength and adaptability. In her report, Captain Vorten suggested that first contact procedures be looked at again. Jake Morrison kept fixing cars, helping his neighbors, and living his life on Earth. But he saw problems in a new way now. He was more likely to question what he thought he knew. He valued creativity and determination in new ways. One person. One meeting. One night that changed how both sides saw things. It looked like a little thing. But small things can lead to big changes too. Sometimes all it takes is one person to look past their assumptions to see that what they thought was weakness might actually be strength in disguise. And that realization, once it starts, can spread like fire through dry grass, burning away old beliefs and making room for new ones to grow. It was a big, complicated universe with a lot of beings trying to figure out where they fit in. But there might have been room for everyone. Even the ones who looked weak. Especially the ones who looked weak. Commander ZX Thor stood in the Grand Council chamber on Korvaxa Prime, the homeworld of the Korvaxians, 2 weeks after the Nevada incident. The chamber was a huge round room with a dome-shaped ceiling that showed a map of known space in real time. The counselors sat in rows that got higher as they got more important. ZX Thor had been to councils before and had gotten praise and new jobs there. This was different. It was like being on trial. High Counselor Vexlar, a decorated soldier who has served in the military for 40 years, started the meeting. We have looked over your first report about what happened on Earth, Commander ZX Thor. Your written account was very detailed. I tried to be completely open, Counselor. Yes, so complete that we have a lot to talk about. Vexlar pointed to the holographic display in the middle of the room, which now showed the crashed ship and Jake working on it. The pictures were made again from the ship's security camera footage. This person, Jake Morrison, worked on your ship for about 8 hours. Yes, Counselor, that is right. And during that time he made 17 separate repairs, 12 of which your own expert couldn't do with the tools he had. That's also right. Counselor Tyxera, who was there for the Science Directorate, leaned forward. How is that possible? Our first look at how humans have developed technology shows that they are at least 300 years behind us in most areas. Yes, they are, ZX Thor said. But knowing how to use technology and knowing how to solve problems are not the same thing. Jake Morrison didn't fix our ship because he knew about quantum resonance. He fixed it because he knew about cause and effect, how things work together, and how to come up with new ideas. Primitive methodology, another counselor said under his breath. Effective methodology, ZYX Thor said firmly. With all due respect, Counselor, we've become so reliant on advanced technology that we've forgotten the basics. When our scanners couldn't find the debris, we accepted that as the limit of what we could know. The humans simply looked. When our tools couldn't fix the problem, we waited for better ones. He used what was available. Vexlar said in a neutral tone, "You're defending their methods. I'm just telling you what happened. Whether that counts as defense is up for debate. Counselor Cormax, a grizzled veteran with a reputation for being strict, stood up. Commander, you've made this person look very good. But let's talk about the security issues. He saw our technology and worked with our systems. How do we know he didn't steal data, plant surveillance devices, or put our security at risk? Because we scanned the ship afterward, Counselor. Multiple times with multiple methods. We found no foreign devices, no data breaches, no signs of espionage. Jake Morrison touched only what was necessary for repairs. He asked no questions about our weapons, our navigation, our communication systems. He simply fixed what was broken and left. Do you really think he didn't care about alien technology? ZYX Thor opened a holographic file. This is the full audio recording of our conversations. You can listen to every one of them. He never asked us where we came from, what we could do, or why we were there. In fact, when we offered information, he often changed the subject back to the repairs that needed to be done. The recording played a number of conversations. This pipe carries plasma at about. I don't need to know what it carries. I just need to know if it's supposed to be broken. Our quantum drive works by. That's nice, but I'm more worried about this grinding noise right now. Can you tell me what's behind this panel? Counselor 2Xera was clearly very interested in the recordings. He actively avoided learning about your technology. Why would a mechanic pass up the chance to learn something so far beyond his experience? I asked him that, said ZYX Thor. He said that knowing how something is supposed to work can sometimes keep you from seeing how it really works. He liked to look at problems with a clean slate. Using ignorance as a method, Cormax said with a laugh. This is what we're celebrating? Not ignorance, Counselor. Humility. He knew what he didn't know and worked within those limits. Unlike us, who thought our superior knowledge meant we could solve any problem. There was a lot of whispering in the room. ZYX Thor could see the council splitting up. Some were nodding in agreement, while others were shaking their heads in disagreement. Vexlar put his hand up to ask for silence. Commander, let's get to the heart of the matter. You've made a strong case that this person was helpful and not a threat. However, this council needs to think about the bigger picture. Earth is a protected world, and humans are considered a developing species that needs to be left alone. Your interaction, no matter how helpful, went against the spirit of that protection. I respectfully disagree, Counselor. The non-interference directive is there to stop us from interfering with natural development or making people dependent on advanced civilizations. Jake Morrison didn't become dependent on us. If anything, we became dependent on him. And his development wasn't stopped. He used skills he already had and knowledge he already had. But now he knows we're here, 2Xera said. That one piece of information could change the course of the Earth. He knew we were there before he helped us. The crash could be seen from miles away. We could have erased his memory, but that would have been an aggressive act that went beyond just accepting help. ZYX Thor stopped. Besides, knowing that aliens exist and proving it to others are two different things. He doesn't have any proof, just a story that doesn't sound believable. Vexlar said, it looks like you've thought this through. Counselor, I've had 2 weeks to get ready and I've had help. ZYX Thor opened another file, and Specialist Ven9's face showed up on the holographic screen. Counselors, Specialist Ven9 has done a full investigation of the event. If you agree, I'd like her to share her results. Vexlar nodded. Go ahead. The recorded presentation by Ven9 started. Her voice was calm, professional, and based on a lot of information. Honored counselors, I've spent 2 weeks looking at the interaction between humans and Corvaxians from a number of points of view, including security, cultural impact, technological exchange, and most importantly, comparing methods. First, safety. The person only had access to the systems they needed to make emergency repairs. After the incident, our scans found no signs of data extraction, device installation, or system compromise. His actions during the encounter were consistent with someone who was only interested in solving problems and not gathering information. Second, cultural impact. We need to ask, what did Jake Morrison learn about us? The answer is not much. He learned that we exist, which he could have figured out by watching our crash. He learned that we can speak English, which required a translator device he never asked about. He learned that we have advanced technology, which was obvious. He learned that we can make mistakes and need help, which makes us more human instead of godlike. Third, the exchange of technology. This is where the analysis gets interesting. The person didn't bring us any new technology. Everything he used came from our ship or his own simple tools. But he did come up with a new way of doing things. We can learn from how he solves problems, how flexible he is, and how he is willing to use good enough solutions instead of waiting for perfect ones. Finally, and most importantly, a comparison of methods. The screen changed to show two analyses side by side: Korvaxian ways of solving problems and human ways of solving problems. We Korvaxians use our strengths to solve problems: advanced sensors, powerful computers, and complex models. We do well when those tools work, but when they don't, as they didn't in the desert, we have a hard time because we've become dependent on them. Humans, on the other hand, have developed a different way of doing things out of necessity. They try. They repeat. They fail quickly and then change. They use good enough and close enough solutions. They use cross-domain thinking, which means using what they know from one area to solve problems in another. These aren't basic skills. They've been honed over millions of years to help people survive. And when our more advanced tools fail, these skills work better. Venina's presentation included in-depth case studies of each repair Jake had done, looking not only at what he did but also at why his method worked when theirs didn't. To sum up, Venina's recording said, "I don't think we should call this a violation that needs punishment. Instead, I think we should call it a valuable learning opportunity. The person showed us where we need to improve, and that information is worth more than punishing the officer who was smart enough to ask for help when he needed it." The talk was over. There was no noise in the council chamber. Then Counselor Twaxera started to clap. Slowly others joined in. Not everyone did, but enough to make a point. Vexlar looked like he was thinking. "Commander, you've put together a strong case. But there is still one big problem. You keep talking about this person as if they were a single case. But they're not. They're a representative of their species. If one human can do this well, others probably can too. So the question is, what do we do about all of humanity?" This was the time ZYX Thor had been getting ready for. "With all due respect, Counselor, that's the wrong question." The room was quiet. A few counselors seemed shocked that a commander would go against the High Counselor so openly. "Explain," Vexlar said in a threatening voice. "The question, what do we do about humanity, assumes that we have the right or need to control them. But we don't. They're growing on their own world, through their own efforts. The better question is, what do we do with ourselves? How do we get ready for the day when humanity joins the galactic community?" "They're centuries away from that," Cormac said. "Are they? In just 1 century they've gone from basic flight to space stations. Their technology is moving faster than ever before. And unlike many species that develop slowly, humans are developing in many areas at once. They may surprise us with how quickly they get there." ZYX Thor brought up data that could be compared. "Look at their trajectory. It took them decades to go from chemical rockets to orbital mechanics. It took them 50 years to go from basic computers to global information networks. It took them a few generations to go from isolated tribes to planetary civilization. They're not developing steadily, they're developing exponentially. That's exactly why some people say we should slow them down," Cormac said, "before they become a problem." "Is it a threat or competition?" ZYX Thor asked. "Those are two different things, Counselor. A threat is something that wants to hurt you, while competition is something that wants what you have: resources, territory, or status. If we are afraid of people, we should be honest about what we are really afraid of." "Commander, you're dangerously close to disobeying orders," Cormac said. "I'm almost honest, Counselor. And that's what this situation needs." ZYX Thor stood up straight. "For hundreds of years, we Korvaxians have been one of the most powerful species in this part of space. We've gotten used to that, but being comfortable makes us lazy, and being lazy makes us weak." He pointed to the holographic Earth that was spinning in the middle of the room. "People aren't comfortable. They're hungry. Not for conquest. History shows that there has been as much cooperation as conflict. But for knowledge, growth, and progress. They want to be better tomorrow than they are today. When was the last time we could say that about ourselves?" No one answered the question that was in the air. Vexlar sat back in his chair. "Are you saying that we should see people not as a problem to deal with but as, what? A mirror? A challenge to make ourselves better? I'm saying we should see them for what they are, a young species with a lot of potential. In a few hundred years they'll be here with us. We can treat them as enemies, suspicious and controlling, or as friends ready to learn from each other. The choice we make now will decide which future we get." Counselor Twaxera got up. "High Counselor, if I may? Commander ZYX Thor's point is valid. Our current Earth observation protocols are very basic. We check on them every few decades, note their progress and move on. But if their development is really speeding up, maybe we should study them more closely. Not to interfere but to understand. To get ready. Prepare for what?" another member of the council asked. For partnership, Tuaxera said without any more explanation. When the time comes, we will have a lot to offer humanity, knowledge, technology, and guidance. But Commander ZX Thor is right, they will also have a lot to offer us. Their ability to adapt, their creativity, and their different ways of solving problems are all valuable traits that we have let go of. The room got quiet when Vexlar stood up. This has been an eye-opening session. Commander ZX Thor, you came here expecting punishment, but instead, you've started a much bigger conversation. The council will need time to think about these things. But I tend to agree that this incident, while out of the ordinary, does not call for punishment. However, he went on, there will be conditions. First, you will create a full training module based on the humans' method. Our officers should learn these adaptive techniques. Second, you and your team will act as consultants to the Earth Observation Program, sharing what you learn from your direct contact. Third, there will be no more unauthorized contact with Earth. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Counselor. Okay. This council meeting is over. We'll meet again in a week to vote on more general policy suggestions about pre-contact species and how we get ready for them. Several counselors came up to ZYX Thor as they left the meeting. Some people said congratulations, some people said they were worried, and a few just wanted to shake his hand. Counselor 2Xera was one of the last people to leave. That was brave of you, Commander. And dangerous. You could have just taken a small punishment and moved on. ZX Thor said, I could have. But Jake Morrison put his own safety on the line to help people he didn't know. The least I could do was put my job on the line to honor what he taught me. And what was that? That doing the right thing is more important than doing the safe thing. That speaking the truth is more important than staying comfortable. That growth takes the courage to admit you were wrong. Duaxera grinned. I hope I get to meet your human friend someday. He taught you well. Yes, I do too, Counselor. Later, ZX Thor wrote in his personal log. I stood in front of the Grand Council today and defended a human I had only known for less than a day. I went against centuries of established policy. I questioned our ideas about superiority and strength. And instead of ending my career, I may have started a conversation that changes how we treat younger species. All because a mechanic from Nevada fixed our ship and, in doing so, reminded us of how much we'd forgotten about solving problems with little money and a lot of creativity. I don't know if Jake Morrison will ever know what he started. I don't know if people will ever learn that this one meeting had an effect on the whole Corvaxian Empire. But I do know that when people do join us among the stars, there will be at least one species that welcomes them not as subordinates or threats, but as equals. Because that's what they deserve. And that's what we need to be, a galactic community that values contribution over conformity, adaptability over assumption, and growth over the comfort of thinking we already know everything. End log. Jake Morrison finished his shift at the garage, got a burger from the diner, and went home to watch the sunset from his apartment balcony. He had no idea what was going on light years away. He still thought about that night in the desert from time to time. The ship, the aliens, the strange beauty of technology that humans can't understand. But most of the time he thought about the universal truth he had proven. Problems were just problems. They didn't care what you thought or what you couldn't do. They just needed to be fixed. And anyone in the universe could do that if they had the right tools, the right attitude, and the desire to try. He had no idea how big the universe was. More people live there. More complicated. But the basics, helping others, fixing things, and doing what needed to be done, never changed. And in some way that made me feel better. Two species had touched for a short time, even though they were very far apart and very different. And it had changed both of them. Not too much. Not right away. But in a meaningful way. That's all it takes sometimes. 1 second. One meeting. Someone who is willing to look beyond what they think. The rest comes from there. 6 months after the Nevada incident, Jake Morrison's life had settled into a new normal. But normal didn't seem like the right word to use for anything anymore. Everything looked the same on the outside. He still worked at Bradley's Auto Repair, still grabbed coffee at the same diner, still helped his neighbor Mrs. Patterson with her stubborn lawnmower every weekend. But something deep down had changed. He could see patterns now that he had never seen before. How systems were linked. The beauty of cause and effect. The same rules worked for fixing a Chevy or an alien spaceship. He also saw the night sky in a different way. There could be worlds around every star making it a sun. And some of those worlds had people, beings who thought, fought, and found solutions. He wasn't the only one in the universe. People weren't alone. That information felt like a weight and a wonder in his chest at the same time. Tom caught Jake looking out the garage window at the sky during the day one afternoon and said, "You're doing it again." "What are you doing?" "Seeing things as if you're looking through them into something else." Tom cleaned his hands with a cloth. "It's been 6 months, kid. Whatever happened that night, and I know something big happened, it's still bothering you." Jake brought his mind back to the present, where he was supposed to be fixing the transmission. "Not eating at me. Just making me think. About? About what is important. About why we do the things we do. About how little we know." Jake picked up a socket wrench and felt how heavy it was in his hand. "Do you ever think about whether the work we do is important, Tom? What about in the big picture?" Tom made a noise. "Kid, I've been working on cars for 40 years. Do you know what I've learned? There isn't a bigger picture. You can only do the work in front of you well or poorly. Mrs. Chin doesn't care about how important her transmission is in the grand scheme of things. She wants it to work and not leak. But what if doing the work right, really right, with care and precision, what if that matters in ways we can't see?" Tom looked at him for a long time. "Hey, you know what? I believe that night was good for you no matter what it was. Jake, you've always been a good mechanic. But you've been great lately. More patient. More complete. Every job is important no matter how small." "Maybe they all are," Jake said in a low voice. "Maybe they are," Tom said. "Now finish that transmission so Mrs. Chen won't keep bothering me about when her car will be ready." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kale Rin stood in front of a class of 40 young officers on the Korvaxian training station Theta 7, which was millions of miles away. The walls of the training room showed complicated tactical situations, but today's lesson wasn't about fighting. "Adaptability," Kale Rin said, his voice full of authority from experience. "We've taught you to trust your tools, your technology, and your established procedures for decades. These things are worth something. But they aren't enough." He brought up a holographic display that showed the crashed ship in Nevada. Some of the younger officers knew the video. It had become famous or infamous depending on who you asked. 6 months ago, my team crashed on a world that was protected. Our advanced sensors couldn't find important problems. We couldn't fix the problems with our advanced tools. We should have been stuck until help came, which might have been too late, according to all of our training and rules." A young officer raised her hand. "But you had help from someone who lived there." "A person. That's right. And that person was able to do what we couldn't. But this isn't a story about how we failed. It's a story about how he did well. Can anyone tell me what this human had that made him better than 4 elite Korvaxian soldiers?" "Be quiet." The officers looked at each other with uncertain looks. "No advanced sensors," Kaelrin went on. "No advanced diagnostic tools. There isn't a quantum computer to model solutions. He had a different way of seeing things. He looked instead of scanning. He tried things out instead of figuring them out. He was okay with good enough, when perfect wasn't possible." Another cop spoke up. "With all due respect, Lieutenant, aren't those old-fashioned ways? Not as good as our methods?" "I thought that too," Kaelrin said. "Until I saw those primitive ways of saving my life. What I learned is that it doesn't matter if you have the best tools if you can't come up with new ideas when they break. It doesn't matter how strong you are if you can't change when strength isn't enough. Our advantages like technology, training, and being stronger only work when conditions are perfect. Adaptability is the best skill to have when things change." He brought up a number of possible situations. "Today you're going to practice solving problems with resources that are purposely limited. No advanced scanners. No computers that use quantum mechanics. Just looking, testing, and thinking outside the box. You're going to learn how to think like the person who saved my team." Someone asked, "What was his name?" "This person." Kaelrin smiled a little. "Jake Morrison. And you'll hear a lot about him in this class. Specialist Ven 9 had a new job with the Science Directorate's Earth Observation Program on the Korvaxian homeworld. Her job was to look at how humans solve problems and find rules that could be used by Korvaxians. She had been studying human history, technology, art, and culture for months. The more she learned, the more interested she became. During one of their regular meetings, she told her research partner, scientist Tolvar, "They're chaos artists. Look at how their technology is growing. It's not in a straight line. It's growing in many directions and at an exponential rate. They don't finish one technology before going on to the next. They make dozens of them at once and then put them together in ways that aren't expected." The holographic display showed the technological tree of Earth. Instead of a straight line, it looked like a huge, connected web. They used chemistry and metallurgy to make engines. Used math and physics together to break atoms apart. Used biology and computers to figure out their own genetics. They take information from different fields and mix it up to see what happens. Tolvar said, "That sounds risky. Experimentation without control. It's not safe." They've had huge failures. But they learn from their mistakes faster than any other species we've seen. They don't think of failure as something to be avoided at all costs. They think of it as information. Ven9 opened another file. "Look at this, Thomas Edison, a man who invented things. He tried more than 10,000 different designs before finally making a working electric light bulb. He said, 'I haven't failed,' when asked about his failures. That's 10,000 ways that won't work." Tolvar said, "That's crazy. No Korvaxian scientist would waste time and money on 10,000 failed attempts." "That's right. Before we tried to build it, we would model, calculate, and predict the best way to do it. That usually works. But there are times when you can't find the best answer just by doing math. Sometimes you have to try, fail, learn, and try again." "You're saying we should plan less and try more?" "I'm pushing for balance. We've made things so efficient that we've gotten rid of the productive messiness that leads to new ideas. People haven't. They are still young and don't have enough resources, so they have to come up with new ideas all the time. And that has made them very good at it." Ven9 opened her personal files and found Jake's picture, which had been put together from footage from the ship. This one person, Jake Morrison, was a perfect example of that idea. He didn't figure out the best answer. He tried something, looked at the results, made changes, and tried again. Instead of guessing, try again. And it worked. What do you think we should do? I think we should look at them more closely. Not to control or guide them, but to learn from them. And I think we should get ready for the day when they become part of the galactic community. When that day comes, things will be different. They're going to question what we think we know, question how we do things, and force us to come up with new ideas that we haven't used in a while. You make them sound like a revolution. Maybe they will be. Or maybe they'll just bring back memories of things we used to know before we got too comfortable." Emma, Jake's sister, had noticed something about him when he got back to Earth. He was helping people more. Not only fixing cars but also looking for problems to fix. Jake offered to look at the heating system at the town's community center when it broke down in early winter. The professional said it would cost $15,000 to replace everything. Jake fixed it for $200 worth of parts and a weekend of thinking outside the box. Jake spent an evening figuring out what was wrong with a disabled veteran's wheelchair lift and fixing it for free. When the robotics team at the local high school couldn't afford the right tools, Jake showed them how to make what they needed out of junk and their own ideas. "You're like a hero in your hometown now," Emma teased him over dinner one night. "Are you going to run for mayor next?" "Just lending a hand," Jake said. "People need things to be fixed. I can fix things. Looks easy. It's more than that though. You're also teaching people. Showing them how to fix their own problems." Jake thought about the team led by Commander Zwax Thor. About how they had learned to look at problems in a new way. "I guess I've learned that sharing what you know is the most important thing. Keeping what you know to yourself doesn't make you stronger. It does by spreading it." That's very deep for a guy who spends his days covered in motor oil. Hey, motor oil is deep. It goes in as a liquid, does its job, comes out dirty, and then gets recycled to do the job again. There is a metaphor in there somewhere. Emma laughed. "Do you know you're strange?" "Someone told me." But other people did notice that Jake was becoming more well-known in the community. Sarah Chin, a government analyst, looked over an unusual pattern that monitoring software had flagged in a plane office in Washington, D.C. 6 months ago, there was an unexplained aerial event over Nevada, she told her boss. Satellite images showed something entering the atmosphere at a high speed, but it vanished before it hit. No one ever found the crash site. Her boss said, "It could have been a meteor that burned up. The official report says that." "Look at this," Sarah said as she pulled up more information. 3 days later, a mechanic from Copper Springs, Nevada, which is 50 miles from where the plane was supposed to go, called in sick to work. The first day he had to take off sick in 3 years. And since then there has been strange activity around him. What kind of things? Nothing against the law. Just important. More people in the community getting involved. Fixing technical problems that had professionals stumped. Teaching more advanced ways to solve problems. And his internet search history shows that he is now more interested in astronomy, physics, and aerospace engineering, things he had never searched for before. Her boss didn't seem to believe her. "You're making a conspiracy theory out of someone who was interested in space?" "Maybe. But I've learned to notice patterns. 6 months ago something happened to Jake Morrison. Something that made him different. What are we supposed to do about it even if something did? Keep looking. Write it down. Learn. We need to know if there are other people out there who have made contact. Don't panic, get ready. You really think he met aliens, don't you? Sarah grinned. I believe something amazing happened. Jake Morrison knows something we don't, whether it's about aliens or something else. People who know amazing things often do amazing things as well. I want to know if he is one of them. Okay, but don't let anyone know. No direct contact. Just looking. Got it? Sarah pulled up Jake's driver's license photo while she was writing her report. She whispered to the screen, "Who are you, Jake Morrison? And what did you see?" Jake Morrison finished cleaning up after dinner on a quiet street in Copper Springs, Nevada. He had no idea that someone was watching and analyzing what he did. He went out on his balcony, looked up at the stars that were starting to show up in the sky and smiled. HFY Thor and his team were probably training new soldiers up there, teaching them lessons they learned from a night in the desert. Ven 9 was probably learning about human culture to figure out what makes people different. Kaelrin was probably getting better at being an officer, a brother, and a person. Jake was just trying to be helpful down here. To fix things that were broken, help where he could, and share what he knew. It didn't seem like much. But he had learned that little things could make a big difference. A single blocked coolant line could stop a whole ship from working. One talk could change the way someone saw the world. You might never see how one kind act can spread. You keep doing little things. Keep fixing things. Keep being helpful. Keep looking at the stars and remembering that the universe was huge and full of beings trying to do the same thing he was. Survive, thrive, and maybe make things a little better than they were. That seemed like enough. That seemed like exactly what he should have been doing. The weight of knowledge wasn't just knowing something amazing. It was knowing you had to do something with that knowledge even if no one else would ever get it. Jake Morrison was fine with that. 1 year after the event in Nevada, the changes it had caused were happening faster than either humans or Korvaxians could have imagined. The Grand Council met on Korvaxa Prime for what many thought was their most important meeting in decades. The subject is the official revision of the species classification system and first contact protocols. High Counselor Vexlar started the meeting in a way that was very direct. For 300 years, we've thought that the most important thing about a species is how advanced its technology is and how ready it is to meet other species in space. Today we are questioning that idea. He pulled up information that had been put together over the past year, like case studies, analyses, and comparisons. A lot of it came from research that started after HFY Thor's testimony. Our current classification system ranks species on a scale from Class 1, pre-industrial, to Class 10, fully integrated galactic civilizations. Earth's humanity is classified as Class 4, industrialized, beginning space exploration, but centuries from achieving faster-than-light travel. The holographic display showed where Earth fit into the classification system. But, Vexlar went on, Commander HFY Thor's encounter showed that this classification doesn't take into account important factors like adaptability, creative problem-solving, resourcefulness under pressure, and the ability to come up with new ideas with limited resources. By these measures, humanity scores much higher than their technological classification suggests. Duexera, the counselor, stood up. I'd like to share the results of the expanded Earth observation program with the Council. She started her presentation when Vexlar gave her the go-ahead. We've been watching people do things in many different areas for the past year. We've found patterns that are amazing. The display showed a number of new things that people have made in the last 100 years. Humans are currently solving problems in ways that parallel or exceed our own capabilities, despite having inferior tools. Their medical technology, while primitive by our standards, achieves results we wouldn't have thought possible at their development level. Their information technology has created a global network that shares knowledge at unprecedented speeds. Their problem-solving approaches are diverse, parallel, and highly adaptive. She opened a certain case study. Think about this. A group of human engineers recently made a water purification system for areas of their world that don't have a lot of resources. The system costs less than one of their currency units to build and doesn't need any outside power. Our engineers looked at the design and said it was brilliant, simple, effective, and perfectly suited to the lack of resources. We would have made something much more complicated and much more expensive that those who needed it couldn't afford. After a year of doubt, Counselor Cormac spoke up. You're picking and choosing examples. For every smart new idea, there are dozens of failures. Oexera agreed, true. But that's exactly what I'm trying to say. People fail all the time and they learn from those failures all the time. Because they use an iterative approach to innovation, they look into a lot more possible solutions than we do. Some of them fail, But the ones that do succeed often do better than our carefully planned methods because they found paths we never thought of. ZYX Thor, who is now the strategic advisor for cross-species relations, gave his point of view. Counselors, I've been studying our first contact history for the past year. In the last 5 centuries we've met 43 species. Our approach has always been the same. Wait until they reach Class 7 status, which means they can travel faster than light, and then make formal contact. This approach assumes that technological progress means that they are ready to join the galactic community. He got information on those 43 species. But look at the results. Of those 43, only 12 are really involved in galactic affairs. 26 are passive members who mostly take in our knowledge without giving anything back. 5 have chosen to isolate themselves because they felt overwhelmed by cultures they weren't ready to engage with as equals. What's your point? Cormax asked. We're choosing species based on technology, not ability. Some species, like the Zorthan, literally stumbled upon faster-than-light travel by accident. Others, like the Zorthan, developed it through grinding patience over thousands of years. Neither of these achievements shows that they are adaptable, creative, or resilient, which are the qualities that make a good galactic partner. And you think people have these traits? I know they do. I've seen it. And more importantly, if we wait until they develop FTL naturally, we miss the chance to interact with them when they're at their most creative and dynamic. Right now they're hungry, creative, and adaptable. In 3 centuries after they've had time to get used to things, they might be more like us, powerful but complacent. People began to murmur in the chamber. Vexlar asked for order. We're not here to decide whether or not to contact Earth, he said. That won't be ready for decades, maybe even centuries. We're here to decide whether our classification system needs to be changed and whether there are other things besides technology that should affect how we rate and interact with developing species. The argument that followed went on for hours. There were a lot of arguments about safety, preserving culture, and the dangers of changing established rules. Finally, Specialist Ven 9 asked for permission to speak. She didn't often speak to the whole chamber because she was a specialist and not a counselor, but people respected her for her year of research. Honored counselors, I've spent the last year learning about people. Not just their technology or how they fight, but also their stories, art, philosophies, values, and ways of thinking. She brought up pictures of buildings, sculptures, and paintings of people. Look at this. The different ways of expressing beauty and meaning. They have thousands of cultures, languages, and belief systems all living together on one world. That diversity does cause friction and conflict, but it also creates an unprecedented marketplace of ideas. Every problem can be looked at from dozens of cultural points of view. More pictures like the International Space Station, the United Nations, and scientific collaborations around the world. And even though they are different, they are learning to work together. Slowly, imperfectly, but truly, they are creating global institutions. They are sharing knowledge across cultural boundaries. They are starting to see themselves not as separate tribes but as one species with a common future. Cormax pointed out, they are also violent. There are wars, genocides, and other terrible things in their past. It is, Ven 9 said. But look at the trend line. Their conflicts are happening less often. Their institutions that help them work together are getting bigger and better. They're learning and changing, not just in terms of technology but also in terms of ethics and society. She pulled up one last picture, the well-known pale blue dot photo taken by Voyager 1, which shows Earth as a tiny dot in the vastness of space. Carl Sagan, a scientist, wrote about this picture. He said it shows that Earth is the only home we've ever known and that everyone we love and know lived their lives on that tiny dot. He used it to argue for peace, cooperation, and recognizing our shared humanity. Ven 9 looked the counselors in the eye. That's how a species starts to understand its place in the universe. Not with arrogance or ignorance, but with humility and determination. They see how small they are and don't give up. Instead, they resolve to explore, learn, and grow beyond their limits. There was no noise in the room. Ven 9 went on, I can't tell you if people are ready for contact. But I can tell you that when they're ready, they'll bring us new ideas that we really need. We've been too comfortable and too powerful for too long. We've forgotten what it means to struggle, to innovate out of necessity, and to see our own smallness and respond with courage instead of fear. Jake Morrison taught us that. One person in one night reminded us that strength comes in many forms. Imagine what millions of people could teach us if they joined the galactic community. Think about how much we could learn from their differences, their ability to adapt, and their unending desire to break through barriers. She sat down after finishing her presentation. Vexlar took a look around the room. We have a lot to think about. This session will be on hold for 3 days so we can think about what we've heard. When we meet again, we will vote on whether or not to change our classification system and protocols. Counselors, think carefully about your positions. The choice we make here will affect how we deal with younger species for hundreds of years. Thor walked over to Ven 9 as the room emptied. That was moving. It was dangerous, but it was moving. Someone had to say it. To remind them that this isn't just about rules and categories. It's about how we see other people, how we define value, and how we make a galactic community that people want to be a part of. Do you think they'll vote to make a change? I think we've given them enough to think about that the outcome isn't certain anymore. And if we're brave enough to sit with it, uncertainty can make us wiser. On Earth, though, Jake Morrison's life had taken an unexpected turn. People in other towns besides Copper Springs knew about his ability to solve problems that seemed impossible. People were looking for him not just to fix things but for any kind of technical issue. He had been offered a consulting job by an engineering company in Las Vegas. A university wanted him to teach workshops on how to solve problems in a flexible way. A filmmaker of documentaries wanted to include him in a series about people who think outside the box. He had said no to most of it. He didn't like all the attention. He thought he wasn't doing anything special. He was just making things better. But he had agreed to one offer, to teach a workshop at the community college down the street. He taught his students how to think outside the box when solving problems, how to make do with what they had, and how to find solutions that weren't obvious. He told his class one night, "You don't need the most expensive tools. You need to know how things work. You need to know how systems work together. Once you know that, you can fix things with whatever you have." He showed them by giving them a broken toaster and a box of random things like duct tape, paper clips, wire, and random electronic parts. Fix it. You have 1 hour. No manuals, no internet. Just looking, testing, and being creative. At first, the students had a hard time because they didn't know what to do. But over time they began to try new things. Testing. Finding out that the heating element wasn't broken, but just unplugged. That a basic wire bridge could reconnect. That duct tape could keep the repair from getting cold. Their faces lit up with real pride when the toaster worked again. Jake said, "That's what I want you to remember. The universe doesn't care about your credentials or your tools. It only cares if your solution works. Every problem can be solved if you're willing to try, fail, learn, and try again." After class, a student named Marcus came up to him. "Mr. Morrison, can I ask you something private?" "Of course. Why do you do this? You could be making a lot more money working as a consultant for big companies. Instead, you're here for free teaching community college students." Jake took his time to think about his answer. Knowledge is only useful if it spreads. If I keep what I know to myself, it dies with me. But if I teach you and you teach others and they teach others, that knowledge grows. It multiplies. It solves problems I'll never see in ways I can't imagine. That's a bit too idealistic. Maybe. But I've seen what happens when people share knowledge instead of keeping it to themselves. I've seen problems that seemed impossible get solved because the right person got the right information at the right time. That's worth more than money. Marcus nodded slowly. "My family thinks I'm wasting my time here. They want me to go to college and get a real education. Learning can happen anywhere you're willing to learn. Some of the smartest people I've met have never been to college. Some of the dumbest people I've met have PhDs. What matters is whether you're curious, willing to try new things and learn from your mistakes." "Thanks, Mr. Morrison. That helps." Jake put away his things as Marcus left. It was tiring to teach, but it felt right. As if he were doing what he was supposed to do. In her Washington, D.C., Sarah Chin kept gathering information about Jake Morrison in her office. The pattern had only gotten stronger over the past year. More people getting involved in the community. Teaching. Finding solutions. And always keep your mind on being flexible and coming up with new ideas. She had also seen something else. A small rise in UFO reports in Nevada over the past year. Nothing is official or confirmed. There were just a lot of strange lights and planes that didn't seem to fit with normal explanations. Her boss asked her as she looked over her latest report, "Are you still chasing your mechanic?" Sarah said, "I'm recording an anomaly." Jake Morrison changed a lot after a certain date. His interests and behavior changed. The skills he's showing aren't just mechanical. They're systems thinking at a level that suggests he's been exposed to advanced ideas. Or maybe he just really wanted to get better. Maybe. But I don't think so. Sarah pulled up satellite images of Nevada from the night of the crash. Something strange happened here and Jake Morrison was there when it happened. I don't know what he saw or what he went through, but it changed him. And changes like that don't happen for no reason. What's the action item even if you're right? Keep an eye on things. Write things down. Learn. If there are other people out there and contact has been made, Jake Morrison might be able to help us understand how people react, how we change, and what it means for our future. Do you really think aliens are watching us? Sarah looked out her office window at the stars. I don't think we're alone in the universe. I think there might be someone else out there watching us to see what we do, who we become, and if we're ready to join them. That's a lot of philosophy for someone who works in intelligence. Maybe. But Jake Morrison taught me something without ever knowing it. The biggest changes start small. One person, one moment, one choice to help instead of walking away. She sent in the report and turned off her computer. The stars outside shone brightly, not caring about what people thought or worried about. But somewhere among those stars, people were asking the same things. Making choices that are similar. Thinking about the same future. And in one small town on one small world, a mechanic went about his life without knowing that he had become a symbol. A bridge between worlds, ways of thinking, and what might be. The paths had started to come together. It would take years, maybe even decades, for it to reach its peak. But it had started. And once something starts, it can't be stopped. 2 years after the Nevada incident, the changes that started with one ship crashing had spread farther than anyone could have imagined. The new species classification system had been approved and put into use on Corvaxa Prime. Now, it was a multidimensional rating that took into account not only technology but also adaptability, the ability to come up with new ideas, cultural resilience, and the ability to work together. With the new system, humans were moved from Class 4 to Class 6 adaptive, which put them in a group of species that were seen as high priority for future contact. The adaptive suffix was new. It was made just to honor species that could solve problems better than others, no matter what level of technology they were at. Commander ZYX Thor, who is now Director ZYX Thor of the new Cross-Species Integration Office, was at his headquarters going over the most recent reports. His team had grown to 40 experts who were studying different pre-contact species, but Earth was still his main focus. Director, you need to see this, Ven9 said as he walked into his office with a data tablet. She had become his deputy director and was in charge of the Human Studies Division. Jake Morrison has just finished his 100th workshop at the community college. But that's not the fun part. She pulled up some video. His students are now running their own workshops. The method is becoming more popular. We're keeping an eye on 17 different educational projects around the world that are based on what Jake teaches. The video showed young people in different places like a village in Africa, a city in Asia, and a school in South America, teaching ways to solve problems, think flexibly, and be resourceful. All of it came from one mechanic in Nevada. It's exponential propagation, Ven9 said again. One person teaches 10. Each of those 10 teaches 10 more. This method could have an effect on millions of people in just one generation. All because we crashed in the desert, ZYX Thor said in a low voice. All because you were smart enough to ask for help. And modest enough to take what you learned from it. ZYX Thor brought up Earth on his holographic screen. The blue-green world turned slowly. How are they doing in other ways? Faster than what our model said. Their space program has sped up. They've set up a permanent base on their moon. They want to send people to Mars within the next 10 years. Their cooperation around the world is getting better, but slowly and with some problems. And what do they know about us? Still very little. There are theories, guesses, people who believe and people who don't. But there is no proof. No proof. We can't find out if Jake Morrison ever told anyone what happened. He kept our secret. More than that, he kept his own secret. He could have said he met aliens or tried to get famous or get attention. Instead, he just used what he learned to help other people. That level of honesty and discretion is amazing. A notification rang. ZYX Thor opened it and smiled. The Galactic Council has given the green light to our plan for faster contact protocols. We won't wait for them to find us when we reach Class 7. We'll get in touch formally. How long until they get to Class 7? Our revised estimates say 30 to 50 years. If their current speed keeps up, maybe less. One human lifetime, Ven9 said. Jake Morrison could still be alive when we get in touch with him. I hope he is. I want to thank him in a proper way. To show him what his help did. Jake Morrison was still teaching, fixing things, and living a quiet life in Copper Springs when he got back to Earth. But he had a lot more power than he realized. Lisa Tran, one of his former students, went on to study engineering at MIT. She had brought Jake's way of solving problems with her and used it to look into sustainable energy systems. Her work had led to breakthroughs in cheap solar technology that was now being used in developing countries. Marcus Williams, another student who had asked why Jake taught for free, had become a teacher himself. In Las Vegas, he ran an after-school program for kids who didn't have a lot of resources. He taught them how to fix things, solve problems, and come up with new ideas. Instead of falling through the cracks, dozens of young people were finding their potential. A third student had become a disaster relief expert, using adaptive problem-solving to help communities get back on their feet after natural disasters with few resources. The waves kept going and going. Jake knew some of this because his students would sometimes come back and tell him what they were doing. But he didn't really get how big it was. He kept teaching, helping, and doing what he thought was right. A woman in a business suit came up to him one night after he had finished his work at the community college. A government ID was clipped to her jacket. "Mr. Morrison? My name is Dr. Sarah Chin. I work for the Department of Defense's Research Division. Could I talk to you for a minute?" Jake's heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. "What about?" "About ways to solve problems. People have heard a lot about your workshops. We might want to change the way you do things for training programs." Jake said carefully, "I'm not really interested in military uses. It's not for fighting. It's for logistics, engineering, and responding to disasters. Times when soldiers have to solve hard problems with few resources. Your way of doing things could save lives." Jake looked at her. There was something in her eyes that showed she was more than just interested in her job. It looked like she was looking for something. "Is it just about solving problems?" he asked. "Yes, officially." Sarah spoke more quietly. "Mr. Morrison, I've been watching you for 2 years now, but not officially. I know that something important happened to you. I know it changed the way you think about things. I'm not here to make you tell me anything or expose you. I'm just interested. You got better because of everything you learned. I believe the world needs more people like that." Jake was quiet for a long time. "If I did learn something, Dr. Chin, it would be that knowing things comes with a duty. That some truths should only be shared when people are ready. That quick revelation can do more harm than good. So you did learn something." "I learned a lot of things. How to figure out what's wrong when I can't see it. How to fix systems that I don't fully understand. How to help people without having to pay them back. Whether that knowledge came from books, experience, or somewhere else." He said with a shrug. "Is it important if the result is good?" Sarah smiled. "No, I guess it doesn't." She gave him a card. "Call me if you ever want to talk about anything, even problem solving. Don't worry. No requests. It's just two people talking to each other about how complicated the universe is." Jake stared at the card for a long time after she left. He then put it in his wallet, not sure if he would ever use it but not wanting to throw it away. Some bridges weren't ready to be crossed yet. But maybe one day they would be. Lieutenant Kaelrin was one of the most respected teachers at the Korvaxian training station. All new officers had to take his classes on how to solve problems in a flexible way. But he had also changed the way people thought. The Korvaxian military was slowly moving away from seeing physical strength as the most important measure of worth and toward seeing different kinds of ability. Along with soldiers who were good at fighting, soldiers who could think critically were also valued. Engineers were just as respected as warriors. Rixen, Kaelrin's brother, had joined the service even though he had some physical problems. They worked in the strategy division, where their brilliant tactical mind was finally recognized and appreciated. Other Korvaxians who were in the same boat were following their lead and going into fields where they could show off their unique skills. Rixen told Kaelrin during a visit, "You've changed things. Not just for me but for a lot of other people who never thought they could serve." "I learned from someone else," Kaelrin said. "A person who taught me that strength can take many forms. I just gave that lesson to someone else. Will I ever see this person? One day. When we get in touch with each other officially. When the time comes, I've asked to be part of the delegation. To say thank you? To show him what he started. To let him know that his help meant a lot to you in ways he will never fully understand." There were still arguments about humans in the halls of the Galactic Council. Some counselors were still doubtful and warned against contacting such a young, unstable species too soon. Some people said that people were perfect partners because they evolved quickly and could adapt easily. But the talk started to change from if to when and how. People formed study groups to learn about culture, psychology, and languages. Protocols were created for the first contact that took into account the fact that Earth is made up of hundreds of nations and thousands of cultures, and that there is no one government or voice. It was difficult, complicated, and never done before. By the time the Korvaxians got to space, most of the species they had talked to had come together. Humans were broken, different, and often at odds with each other. Sarah told a planning committee, "It's going to be messy." "That might be what we need though." A species that makes us rethink what we thought we knew, that makes us change, and that shows us that being united doesn't mean being the same. People kept asking, who should be the first official human contact? The heads of powerful countries? Scientists? People who go into space? HFY Thor had been working on a different plan for months. When the time comes, he told his team, I think we should get in touch with someone who embodies the good things we liked about people. Someone who is flexible, humble, helpful, and honest. Ven9 said, you mean Jake Morrison. Jake Morrison is what I mean. He was a representative of all people to us, even if he didn't know it. Maybe he should also be our introduction to people. That's very strange. So was getting help from a mechanic who was a person. But it turned out pretty well, didn't it? Two species were on a collision course across the galaxy, but not for war. They were going to meet. The timeline was unclear and the outcome was uncertain, but there was no doubt about the momentum. Jake Morrison went on with his quiet life, not knowing about the bigger things that were going on around him. Teaching, fixing, and helping. He was still the same person, but he understood better why it was important. He still looked at the stars sometimes and wondered if his alien friends were looking back at him. He had no idea they were. He didn't know that they thought about him a lot. He didn't know that a mechanic from Nevada had become a case study in how to be flexible, a teaching example of how to be humble, and a symbol of what people could be at their best. He just knew that it was the right thing to do. That sharing what you know was important. You couldn't always see how those small acts of kindness spread. And sometimes that's all you need. One person doing the right thing and getting others to do the same can start a revolution that changes everything. The ripples had turned into waves. They would soon turn into a tide. When that tide finally brought two species together in an official way, the universe would change. Not through war or conquest, but with working together, growing, and respecting each other. One night in the desert, a mechanic fixed a ship, which changed the way two civilizations saw each other. The future was on its way. And it looked good. 28 years after the Nevada event, the time that people had been unknowingly getting ready for finally came. Jake Morrison was now 60 years old. His hair was gray and his hands were still strong from working with tools all his life. 5 years ago he officially retired from Bradley's auto repair, but for Jake, retirement meant teaching more, not less. His workshops had grown from the community college to online courses that reached millions of people around the world. His method of adaptive problem-solving, being resourceful, failing quickly, and learning quickly had a big impact on many fields, including engineering, medicine, and disaster relief. Along with traditional methods, universities taught Morrison methodology. His ideas were used by international relief groups to train volunteers. Jake himself stayed modest about it all. He was just a mechanic who knew a few things and told others about them. Nothing out of the ordinary. He didn't know that a group of Korvaxians had come to Earth in space. The ship was huge, much bigger than any human-made spacecraft. It stayed at the Lagrange point between Earth and the Moon, where it could be seen by human telescopes but didn't do anything aggressive. Director HFY Thor was on board. He was now old by Korvaxian standards but still sharp. He was getting ready for the most important moment of his long career. Ven9 said, all human space agencies have found us. She was now middle-aged and gray was starting to show in her markings, but her eyes still showed the same sharp intelligence. People all over the world are talking about it. Some people are scared, but strangely, a lot of people seem happy. People have been imagining this moment in their fiction for 100 years, HFY Thor said. They've gotten ready for contact in ways that many other species haven't. It could make this easier. Or harder if their expectations don't match reality, Kaelrin said. He was also there, and he was a general in the Korvaxian military who had been asked to go on this mission. Specialist Torvan, who was no longer on active duty but was called back for this historic event, checked the communication systems. All of Earth's broadcast frequencies are set up. The whole world will hear you when you say the word. HFY Thor took a big breath. 28 years ago he was a commander who crashed in the desert. He was now the first official contact between humans and aliens. It was so heavy that it was hard to believe. Send the message, he said. All over the world, every TV, radio, and other communication device that could pick up broadcasts suddenly got the same signal. The picture was clear. A tall, angular alien in a suit standing in what was clearly a spaceship. People of Earth, HFY Thor said, and his words were translated into all major human languages at the same time. I am the Korvaxian people's director HFY Thor. I speak for the Galactic Council when I say hello and welcome you to the larger cosmic community. The broadcast went on for 10 minutes and covered the basics. Humans were not alone, there were many species among the stars. Humans had been watched and were now ready for contact, and the Korvaxians wanted to establish diplomatic relations. "We do not come as conquerors or saviors," ZYX Thor told the billions of people who were watching. "We come as neighbors, ready to share knowledge and friendship with a species we have come to deeply respect. We ask for permission to send a group to Earth to start official relations. You have 24 hours to think about it and answer." The transmission was over. Things were going crazy on Earth. The United Nations held emergency meetings. Scientists rushed to study the transmission. Religious leaders had a hard time with the consequences. People who weren't famous fought, celebrated, panicked, and wondered. But there was a surprising thread of readiness running through the chaos. People had thought about this for so long that when it finally happened, people reacted with a sense of finally. Jake Morrison watched the broadcast on his TV in Copper Springs, Nevada, with a strange mix of feelings. Joy, amazement, and something else. Recognition. That voice. That bearing. Could it be? He took out an old box from his closet that he hadn't opened in years. He had kept one thing from that night 28 years ago, a small piece of the ship's hull that had broken off while it was being fixed. He kept it not to prove anything but to remember that strange things really happened. His phone went off. It was Emma, who is now a Caltech professor of aerospace engineering. "Are you watching this, Jake?" "Yes. This is amazing. This makes everything different. I need to go to Washington because they are putting together a scientific advisory team." "Jake, people just joined a community in space." "I know, Em. You don't seem surprised." Processing." After she hung up, Jake sat by the window looking at the stars and holding the piece of alien metal. He wanted to tell someone that he knew them and had met them before. But another part of him knew that this moment wasn't about him. It was about people getting on a bigger stage. His job had been to help people get ready by teaching them and sharing what he knew about how to be flexible and solve problems. The how didn't matter. The result did. Emergency procedures were put into place at the United Nations. Every country had a say, but it was hard to work together. Some people wanted to be accepted right away. Others said to be careful. A few people said the military should be ready just in case. Dr. Sarah Chin, who is now a senior advisor to the Secretary General, stood in front of the group. Over the years, she had worked her way up the ranks, going from being interested in the unknown to being an expert in strategic analysis. She said, "We need to be careful how we respond. This is the most important time in history for people. We should take their offer, but we also need to make sure that we represent the diversity of Earth. Scientists, philosophers, artists, and regular people, not just governments." One ambassador asked, "How do we choose who speaks for all of us?" "We don't pick just one person. We pick a group of people to speak for us, our differences, our values, and our potential." The argument went on for hours. Finally, everyone agreed that people would accept the Korvaxian offer. There would be a delegation made up of diplomats, scientists, and cultural leaders from all over the world. 20 hours after the first contact, the response was sent out. "People of Korvaxa," the UN Secretary General said, "we accept your offer of contact on behalf of all the nations of Earth. We are happy to have you as neighbors and friends. We are ready to start this new chapter in human history." ZYX Thor was very relieved to get the message on the Korvaxian ship. There were so many ways it could have gone wrong. But people had come together and been very open about it. "Get the shuttle ready," he said. "We're going down." But ZYX Thor had a personal task to do before the official diplomatic mission. 3 days later, Jake Morrison was still fixing things in his garage when a shadow fell across his workbench. He looked up and his wrench fell to the floor. He saw someone standing in his driveway that he knew right away, even after 28 years. "Hello, Jake Morrison," said Commander Director ZYX Thor as he took his translator out of his pocket. "It's been a while." Jake stood up slowly, his head spinning. You know me? Do I remember you? For almost 30 years now, Jake, you've been the most important case study in Korvaxian human relations. My people know you well. You are the person who showed us that our ideas about strength and weakness were wrong. I just fixed your boat. You did a lot more than that." ZYX Thor stepped forward with a friendly look on his face. "You made us think in a new way. You showed us things we had forgotten to appreciate. You saved our lives and didn't want anything in return. And then you used what you learned to help other people. Have you been watching me? We've been keeping an eye on all of humanity. It's normal for species that haven't been in contact yet. But yes, we did pay special attention to you. It was amazing to see you teach, see your methods spread, and see how one person's way of solving problems could affect millions." Jake's legs were weak. He sat down on the stool at his workbench. Why are you here? I mean, shouldn't you be doing something else like going to the UN? I will be. The official diplomatic process starts tomorrow. But first I want to say thank you. For me. To let you know that the night in the desert wasn't just a fluke. It changed the way two civilizations will interact with each other. I don't get it. ZX Thor sat on a toolbox nearby, which made him taller than Jake. After that night, I spoke in front of our Grand Council. I told them about you, what you did, and what we learned from it. It started a debate that lasted for years. We thought about how we treat other species. We changed how we classify things. We changed the way we teach our troops. We started to value creativity and adaptability as much as strength and technology. He pointed up at the stars. Every change, every new policy, and every shift in how we think can be traced back to one night when a mechanic in Nevada helped 4 soldiers who were stuck and showed them they had been measuring worth wrong. Jake was quiet, shocked. You never wanted to be recognized, ZX Thor said. You never told me what happened. You used what you learned to help other people. That honesty and discretion confirmed everything I thought I knew about you. What's going to happen now? Jake finally asked. Now, people are part of the galactic community. It will be hard and complicated at times, but in the end it will be good. Jake, you've done a great job getting people ready. The methods you taught, being flexible, finding new ways to solve problems, and being creative, are exactly what people will need to do when they step onto this bigger stage. Will Earth be okay? We still have a lot of problems and are still fighting with each other. All species have problems. You don't have to be perfect to get in touch. It's growth. And people are getting better, learning, and growing. Yes, you have problems. But you also have the will to work together, be creative, and solve your problems. That's what counts. ZX Thor stood up and got ready to go. I wanted you to know that you made this possible before the official process starts. Not only the contact itself, but also the kind of contact it will be, respectful, collaborative, and based on learning from each other instead of dominating or depending on each other. Jake said, I didn't do anything special. I just fixed what was broken. That's right. You saw a problem and fixed it. You helped people who needed it. You learned something useful and told other people about it. Jake, those aren't little things. Those are the things that matter most. No matter how strong or weak someone is physically or technologically, those are what make them strong. ZX Thor reached out his hand, which was a human gesture he had learned just for this moment. Jake took it and they shook hands. Thanks, Jake Morrison. For your help, your honesty, your ability to make a difference, and your discretion. The universe is better because you're here. Jake sat in his garage for a long time after ZX Thor left, thinking about everything. He had always tried to be helpful. To make things right. To teach others. He had never tried to be great or important. But it looks like significance found him anyway. Or maybe, and this thought hit him hard, maybe meaning was always there, in the little things. In helping. In teaching. Doing the right thing because it was right, not because someone was watching, recording, or measuring. He took the piece of hull that he had kept for all these years. In the garage light, it shone like an alien and beautiful thing. The world would never be the same after tomorrow. People would enter a new age. But tonight, an old mechanic in a garage in Nevada smiled and went back to work on his neighbor's lawnmower. The universe was big and full of wonders, but the work in front of you still needed to be done. Things that were broken still needed to be fixed. People around you still needed help. And real strength came from being flexible, creative, honest, and willing to help others. That was what Jake had learned and told others. That lesson changed 2 cultures. And as Earth got ready to join the galactic community, this was the lesson that people would take with them into space. Not as victors. Not as beggars. But as partners ready to learn and teach, and adding their own unique point of view to an age-old cosmic conversation. The future had arrived. And it was built on the simple truth that helping others, coming up with creative ways to solve problems, and sharing what you know are all important. The same principle applies whether you're fixing a car in Nevada or dealing with the complicated world of galactic diplomacy. Look at what's broken. Use what you have to fix it. Tell others what you learn. Do it again. That's how you make the world better. Or the whole universe. One fix at a time.